A lecturer in economics at Mississippi State, one of my favorite guys to talk to, because somewhere buried in his head is the answer to the question, we're all broke, how do we fix that? Jim Leggett, how you doing this morning, Jim?
I think you work harder and smarter, but aside from that, I'm doing great. It's a beautiful fall day, heading for a weekend. We got the secular religion in the Southeast going on, college football, and my wife would tell you we got 2 baseball scrimmages this weekend. So all in all, not bad.
And busy, it sounds like. Very, very
Yeah,
busy.
that's one thing about living in a
Let's
college town. You're always busy.
you don't have a choice. It's almost law at that point.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you, the economy, we're kind of entering into a gray period right now because with the government shutdown going on, and we'll get back to that in a second, we're not getting any financial data anymore.
Yeah.
How is that going to affect how things unfold from here?
Well, and I think, the part of me that's nerdy says data's good, more data is better. And the unemployment stats were supposed to come out today. And that's probably, if you look at all the statistics that matter, that's the only one that people that drives votes. You don't get excited about GDP growth, but you should. But unemployment, you do. The last snapshots we had suggest things are slowing down, ignoring the methodological issues, which the world has changed and no one can fix those. But it looks like things are slowing down. The Wall Street Journal had an interesting article this morning that of course, just because the government isn't publishing statistics doesn't mean we don't need to know. And a lot of financial community as using their they're also their imperfect measures, and they all are kind of pointing the same way. We're in kind of a sluggish period. I think the government shutdown doesn't help. I think there's a lot of wait and see what the court's going to do about tariffs. And plus, I think as a general statement, people tend to get antsy about the future, just as a general statement.
No, I think you're exactly right. Let me ask you, what's the sell-by date on being nervous about the tariffs? It's been 6 months. How long does this go before we quit saying, well, I don't know, it could go bad any moment now, which is basically, to me, the general state of being every day right now is it could go bad at any moment. That's what it feels like.
Yeah. Well, I won't give you a date because I don't know what it is. But I think part of the problem is we don't know what, in any given moment, we don't know what the tariffs are. And if you're a business, you don't know how to plan. I think what we're seeing right now, a lot of businesses are eating them temporarily because they think it's going to go away. And a lot of businesses back in when all this started bought a bunch of stuff before the tariffs hit. So they're selling inventory that hit. And think about basic business. You can only absorb a 30 to 40% increase in cost for so long. And I think the Supreme Court will decide whether the president's use of, quote, the emergency power over kitchen cabinets is a national security concern. And here's where I think, no, I'm not a lawyer, but I play one on the radio. The power to, I did take constitutional law, so that kind of makes me qualified, right? The power to,
counts, yeah.
And I actually made an A, so that should be worth something, right? But the power to tax is in the purview of the House of Representatives. And if you're sitting there beating your chest about all the revenue we got, if I were arguing that case, boys and girls, you can't have it both ways. So I think there's a legal issue. And I think probably for people like me, we're going to find out whether a couple hundred years of economic thought is right or wrong, as you play this off. And it's troubling to look at the 1930s. We've seen this movie before, and it didn't work well.
Yeah, that's a very good point. One thing that I'm seeing, and I think we're getting some false readings on some things, and I saw one stat that came out, it was either end of last week or start of this week, that the basic income numbers were up like 4.1%. Yeah. And spending was up 4.2%. Credit is going to explode on us eventually, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, when you say explode, is at some point our creditors say, "I'm tired of lending you money." Is that what you're trying?
I don't mean big growth. I mean it's going to blow up and take a bunch of stuff with it.
Yeah, because think about how it works in your personal life. Your bank is willing to loan you money. Here, Dave, you want some more money? Here, Dave, you want some more money? Until that one day you miss a payment, and all of a sudden that you're in hock. And as a saying is, if you're a little customer and get in trouble with the bank, it's your problem. If you're a big customer and get in trouble with the bank, it's the bank's problem. But if you look at it, one of our biggest components of national uh, of our debt budget is interest, and that's a self-inflicted wound. Because and you would like to think that the debate about the shutdown is about fiscal responsibility. Unfortunately, it's not. It's about scoring points. And maybe after the break we can chat a little bit. It's almost a system destined to have a train wreck just because of the way it's structured.
Well, we keep going out there and pulling up pieces of the railing down the track a little bit from us, and then we expect it to keep running well. Eventually, you wind up in the ditch, and that's what I'm worried about. When spending is outpacing increase in incomes, increase in spending outpacing increase of incomes, there's only one possible way it's two, I guess. You could be dipping into savings if you have them, or you're utilizing credit and the buy now, pay later programs that have become popular. And sooner or later, that economic engine is going to grind to a halt. There's just no other way to look at that. And I think it's going to surprise some people, Jim, when that happens.
Right. And in a way, what's kind of interesting, the way these things typically work, some people have used the sand pile analogy. You keep piling on sand, and then you put that one piece of grain of sand on it, topples the whole thing. But the history of I'll call it debt crises. You see them coming, you see them coming, you see them coming, and then boom. And it's kind of a scenario like we just described. You miss a payment and all heck breaks loose. Well, I would think if I was Secretary of Treasury, your doomsday scenario, it's a bad day, you drive to work, and there's an urgent phone call from the finance minister of China. And that can't be what, or it doesn't have to be China, or it could be J.P. Morgan Chase says, Mr. and Mrs. Secretary, no, I don't think we want to buy any more bonds.
Well,
it never is pretty.
No, we've seen some fluctuation in the buying of debt for America already, and it ain't fluctuating up. So we're kind of easing in that direction, I think, and that's going to impact everything. And like you said, it's going to be one of those deals where you're going to go to bed on a Tuesday night, and things are going to be fine, just business as usual, and you're going to wake up Wednesday morning, and the whole world will have collapsed, it feels like. Is there any way to prepare for that?
Well, I think, it depends on how risk averse you are. Some would say get hard assets like gold and stuff like that. I think the way you really prepare is just like the government. Don't overextend yourself. Don't buy a house you can't afford. Don't go on that vacation you can't afford. And, I think our parents' generation kind of understood something because their parents got whacked by debt in the 20s. If you live within your means, for example, my dad thought it, partially because his family got foreclosed on in the 30s, is he thought having a credit card was in the league with the devil. No, but that generation, he paid off his mortgage earlier because he didn't want them chasing him. That's where we think just because I have a credit limit, that's my piggy bank, and I can use it all the way up.
Well, but eventually those credit limits get maxed out, and that's that is my biggest worry when I see these numbers come out. But I don't see anybody talking about that, and I think it's because they don't want to talk about it. It's a little too scary, and they don't know what, if anything, can be done about it.
Well, think of the typical homeowner. Maybe it's not the typical homeowner. You kind of figured out how to have more house than you can afford. And if you've ever owned a house, there's always something you didn't anticipate. Typically air conditioners or roofs. And depending on the size of your house, that's a $5,000 to $10,000 expenditure easily. And if you're tapped out, you might could get money, but at 30%, you might as well just go on to Guido.
Yeah, exactly. And Guido will not be kind if you skip a payment on him. Which
they get annoyed about
that. There's been movies, there have been books. I think it's well established. Guido does not mess around when it comes to getting his payments. We're talking with Jim Leggett, lecturer of economics at Mississippi State University. And we will continue breaking down the problems of the world when we come back here on Mornings.
And maybe we'll have a solution.
Mississippi Dave Hughes, and with us, lecturer in economics and all-around good guy, even though his schedule is packed. Don't try to book him anywhere right now. Jim Leggett, how are you doing today? Well, we discussed it at the top of the last segment. You got a million things going on, man.
Like that's the joy of living in a college town. It wears you out, but it's a lot of fun. And when I lived in the Jackson area, you would think you'd have more to do, but it doesn't work that way. Like it's because you've got the university and all the things it focuses on. In a small town, everybody knows everybody, which is a good thing and a bad thing.
Yeah, it depends on the situation most of the time.
Yeah.
We're talking about the economic situation. The shutdown that's going on is the only thing anyone wants to talk about right now, it seems, in Washington and in economic circles as well. Ultimately, long term, what kind of impact is this going to have economically?
Well, I think it's economics and multiple part answer. I think like most shutdowns, it's going to be a bump in the road. And it's kind of interesting. I was just looking at the history. Most of them are penny ante ones. Like here's one under Reagan administration for 4 hours. There was a long one of 21 days in 1995. And then another one in 2013. And then the longest on record was 2018, 2019, 19 days. Now, if you're a government, if you need the services the government has to offer, parks to passports to everything in between, or unemployment data, for example, you don't have to figure out how to do with that. The government workers, at least you stick to past experience, they get paid. Hopefully they have some creditors that will work with it. The kind of the subtle effect here is the people who sell stuff to government workers are in trouble. Suppose I'm downtown DC and I have a restaurant that does a thriving business lunch deal. I have no customers. And in fact, I think it was a journal had something, they're offering discounts to get you to come down, or the guy pushing the food truck. And partially said, particularly the guy who's pushing the food truck, well, you should have prepared for it. The reason you're pushing a food truck is because you're trying to food cart, So that's the bigger thing is, we're talking about the things that set it off. At some point the world says, you people can't get your act together. And if you look at the system, I'm talking the debt limit. The concept is great. You have to vote to spend more money than you have. And in theory, it should force you to set priorities. In practice, it's used by one side or the other to skewer the other. And it's Michelle and I, my wife, were talking about it. It's like, okay, Dave, you get to play Macbeth in this play. And then, whoops, I'm sorry, you're supposed to play. I forget the other, wall play. It's almost, like wall actors on the stage. And then my wife also pointed out a good point is both sides are kind of hostage to the extremes. And she said, well, Schumer cut a deal with him. Now his folks have hung him out to dry back in March. So he's got to take the high line. And you know how these games of chicken work. Usually both sides lose, So I think we'll work it out. I don't think we'll get to 35 days, but it's just not good governance to work it out. And if I got to be the benevolent dictator, I'd get rid of that. Not because I don't think it's a good idea. It just doesn't work. It doesn't achieve the result. And like some rules set you up for the very train wreck you didn't want to have happen. Because at some point, the world said, you people can't get it together. Now, if folks are interested, it seems like there's more government shutdown drama, more shutdowns than there have been. Just eyeballing this list, there may be like a dozen. But what was interesting on this, it cost the government for the last shutdown $5 billion. Think about all the processes, shutting down stuff. Let's do something simple. I'm putting a sign up at the Smithsonian that says you can't be there. And all the things you have to do to kind of put in something like that in the practice. That's $5 billion. While to you and I, that might mean a little bit. But to to the government, that's not even hadn't even qualified as rounding error. But I think what it says, if I were an outsider, I say, you people can't get your stuff together. And this conflict between the two parties is kind of the way the system's supposed to work, And for whatever reason, as my wife pointed out, compromise is a bad word. And last time I checked, it's part of life.
Every day, all day. I have another overly complicated question because it's the only kind I ever ask you. I'm fully aware of that. You're talking about the government debt, which is out of control. I think everyone can agree on that. Well, most people can agree on that. And just about every country on the planet has debt. My question to you is, who do we owe? Pluto? I mean, where is all this debt at? Who owes who here?
Very, very fair question. I think it's like 30 plus trillion. There's something called Debt Clock USA. You can go look at it, and you see all these numbers just spinning. But the more relevant question is, before we get to that, is percent of GDP, which is really percent of how, and it's about 130-ish, give or take. That's more than World War II. What we know about World War II, the war ended, that came down. But you asked who owes it? About half of the U.S. debt is held domestically, various investors, and the other half is held by basically the rest of the world. The big three are Bank of England, Japan, and China. China's been reducing their holdings, and roughly speaking, they're about 10% of piece, and then everybody else. But kind of doomsday scenario starts out. One of those central bank says we don't want any more, and you don't have to. So all of a sudden, 10% is in play. That's a problem. That's how. It's usually. I think of any crisis you can think about, some little thing that probably the ultimate. It's not an economic crisis, but it's still a crisis. World War One, all the events that led to World War One started because that guy in Sarajevo shot the Archduke of Austria-Hungary. It was this is one of these things that makes you go, ugh. Complete accident. He had gone to where the guy was speaking, the Archduke, and he couldn't get close enough to shoot him. So he's probably going, darn it, I can't even do an assassination right. And then the driver of the Archduke made a wrong turn and all of a sudden ended up right in front of this guy at a dead end. So even I could have hit that shot. But the point behind that story is when that crisis, or when a debt crisis occurs, some event like that, a small thing that doesn't seem to matter. One of the more famous episodes in history, it's a debt crisis. We talk about the Weimar Republic, Germany, post-World War One. And basically, they were printing money. They knew they were playing with fire, and they had a political system that it was complete violence. The Nazis were going after the communists and going after everybody else, and then some political figure got assassinated. House of Cards, relatively minor. House of Cards, whole thing collapsed, and I almost have to see if I can do this. In that month of October 1925, hopefully this will show across, probably doesn't. But if you see that number, that's the inflation rate for 1 month.
29,000?
Yes. So prices doubled about 3 days. You can imagine. And here's what that means. If you had money on October 1st, by October 30th, you're broke. You're selling the furniture to eat. Now, and suppose you have a rabble rouser who says, we'll make things better again. And the whole point of that kind of that digression is, while we think economics is boring, if you mess up your economy, you're going to mess up your political system. And that's a classic example. I think it's the most powerful one, because you can argue the average German probably wouldn't have paid Hitler any sense. But all of a sudden, I get a little desperate. I get wiped out. I'm a powerful speaker, and I got somebody to blame. Yeah, maybe I'll sign up for that. I think one of your colleagues said, most of us are 5 missed meals away from doing something silly.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And I do have to say, Jim, as usual, You have been a veritable ray of sunshine.
They don't call it dismal science for nothing.
Jim Leggett, lecturer of economics, and I'm sure your middle name is Cassandra. It has to be at this point, doesn't it?
I think that's part of the job.
Yeah. Well, you don't have a choice, really. That's just the way the whole thing's bolted together. Jim Leggett, always enjoy talking to you, man. Keep up the good fight, and next time let's talk about something fun, like running a lemonade stand, something, anything.
Basketball, or my wife would say college baseball, whatever.
Perfect. We'll do that next time. Jim, appreciate it. Thank you so much.
See you, Jensen.
We will continue here on Mornings on SuperTalk Mississippi right after this. Keep it here.